Hi everyone, welcome to my first vlog on coaching assessment where I'll be evaluating and reflecting on my own coaching behavior for one of my training sessions. Before analyzing the session, I will first start explaining what a coaching process entails and how it can influence coaching behavior. The coaching process can be seen as a multifactorial, highly complex, and dynamic approach involving a series of key steps aimed at helping an athlete or client improve their performance or skill in a given area and maximize their potential. This process is context dependent and can be influenced by factors such as the interpersonal dynamic between coach and athlete, external constraints such as training and match schedule and equipment availability, the coach's philosophy, and coaching environment. Therefore, due to its dynamic nature, the coach may need to adapt his or her coaching style to the needs and demands of the environment and individual or team in order to maximize the effectiveness of their coaching. Feedback is an important part of this process and a powerful tool which needs to be carefully and intentionally implemented in order to maximize its effectiveness and positively affect the athlete's motor learning. Within the context of this blog, I will be focusing on the coaching feedback aspect of the process, reflecting on the positive events as well as points of improvement during the session with one of the soccer team's goalkeepers, Leonie. We've started the session warm up with bodyweight activation drills and movement skills. Here I'm giving Leonie explicit verbal instruction as to what she needs to focus on during the drill while demonstrating the movement. When I coach athletes on the drills they have to execute, I choose to keep immediate corrective feedback to a minimum, usually reserving one or two focus points as reminders during the drill, such as sit back and chest up during the squat instead of correcting, with most of the instruction and feedback occurring before the start of the exercise or during rest periods. Looking back on the video, I realized that in many situations, such as with the bodyweight squat, I tend to provide very detailed instructions to the athlete in those feedback moments, which could turn out to be too much unnecessary information if coupled with the focus points I may give during execution. This overflow of instruction may not prove useful in certain scenarios, as some studies have shown that detailed and concurrent feedback can interfere with movement execution and the athlete's ability to focus on task requirements. However, it can be argued that during simple tasks such as warm up drills already known to the athlete, this may not be much of an issue due to their familiarity and experience, but could prove detrimental when learning new or more complex movement, such as with an Olympic lift variation as shown later in this video. In both cases, providing less frequent or amount of feedback, preferably task goal related, would be a more efficient use of practice time in order to improve movement quality long term. My style of coaching and tendency to give detailed instructions may be influenced by my past career as a tennis player, a sport in which it is quite common for coaches to give large amounts of feedback concerning both limb movement and task goal oriented feedback, as well as concurrent feedback. It can also be influenced by my eagerness to improve an athlete's movement quality, leading to these moments of being overly instructive and technical. Seeing and reflecting on these moments after filming helped me become more aware of my tendencies and improve upon them by striving to give athletes less instruction than I intend to and allowing them more room to search for movement solutions on their own. Moving on to ankle hops and pop float skips, I use the same feedback approach with Leonie, giving a mix of internal and external cues prior to the exercise. As in the case with the bodyweight squat and lunges, these are familiar exercises for Leonie, which she has done multiple times, and even though the amount of instruction wouldn't interfere with her performance of these drills, it would still be a more efficient use of my coaching feedback, training time, and the athlete's attentional focus to limit this amount to only one or two key points. Again, this becomes even more critical when we get to our main exercises or more complex movements. This is because the amount of attention the athlete can give to a particular movement task is not only influenced by his or her familiarity with it, but also the instruction and feedback given by the coach. The less instruction that is given, the less likely the athlete will have difficulty in allocating attention towards efficiently performing the movement task. The first main exercise is the broad jump. Here I want Leonie to focus on explosively pushing off the ground and focusing on gaining as much distance as she can, therefore cueing her to first pull herself into the ground and then explosively drive away from the ground. When it comes to power exercises such as jumps, I typically use externally focused cues in order to drive intention and focus. As Wolf et al. Has shown in a study concerning the effect of different types of cues on executing a volleyball serve in the first experiment and kicking a soccer ball at a target in the second experiment, that externally focused feedback produced more efficient execution of movement compared to the internally focused feedback. Furthermore, learning effect after the retention period was also greater with the external feedback, showcasing the advantage of using this type of cues. Next, we've moved on to the hang power snatch. Leonie only just recently started utilizing Olympic lifts in her training, and as such is still learning the basics of the lift. Therefore, we are going to use progressive drills to build up to the hang power snatch by breaking down the movement in three parts: hip extension, snatch high pull focusing on the contact point, and finally the snatch itself. I start by reminding her of a couple of key points regarding starting position, posture, and execution, all while demonstrating these key points myself in order to give Leonie kinesthetic awareness. Additionally, I also gave her the analogy of throwing a medicine ball overhead in order to give her an understanding and visualization of how we're actually trying to perform the full snatch variation. I have found that employing this type of analogy for Olympic lifts is useful for the players that I'm coaching due to simplifying this complex movement to something that is more familiar for them, and in doing so, making it easier to feel and apply the correct technique. As Liao and Masters have shown, learning through analogies is another effective tool for improving performance through implicit learning. However, as mentioned earlier in the video, my tendency to overly provide information, both through external as well as internal feedback, could negatively affect movement performance, especially considering that the snatch is a coordinatively complex movement and that Leonie is only a beginner with this exercise. As can be seen in the video, I also still tend to give some concurrent feedback during the exercise, which may not be optimal timing considering the above mentioned factors. In retrospect, a better approach may be to simply let Leonie learn by going through the progression drills themselves and to mainly rely on a few carefully selected cues focusing externally and using my analogy as a reference, reserving additional information or corrections in future sessions as a step-by-step approach. Next exercise is a single leg Romanian deadlift. Here, as with the hang power snatch, I've given Leonie another analogy, imagining that she has headlights pointing from her hips and that those lights have to always point towards the ground, giving her an external point of focus. She manages to perform the exercise correctly on all repetitions, requiring no intervention from my side. This is an exercise which she has performed before on multiple occasions and has become quite proficient at it, but with the occasional rotation of the hips during the first repetitions of the exercise. In this scenario, I haven't provided Leonie with a lot of instruction due to previous practice with it, as well as the only concern being the direction the hips are pointing at. I've realized looking back on the video that in this instance I do provide much less feedback compared to previous exercises due to the context of Leonie's experience with the exercise. Reflecting on my coaching feedback by use of video has allowed me to become more aware of my behavior and coaching style, particularly when it comes to the amount of feedback that I give to my athletes during sessions. Video based reflection has been shown to impact coaches' self awareness of their coaching behavior by allowing them to objectively reflect on their practices and stimulate learning, thus proving to be an effective tool to use for developing one's own coaching practice. And it is a tool which I will incorporate more often in order to critically analyze my coaching habits and improve upon them where needed. Lastly, for core stabilization, we performed a plank pull through, and same as with a single leg RDL, I've given the same type of analogy with the hips as headlights in order to keep the hips as stable as possible during the exercise. One thing I've noticed during execution is that when stabilizing on her right arm, she tended to shift the right side of her hip a bit more. I asked her about it during the rest period if she noticed it herself, and she acknowledged she was unaware of it. So I asked her to pay attention to the right side of her hips during the second set, and she managed to improve upon that. Similar to the RDO, I didn't have to use a lot of instruction due to her familiarity with the exercise and only one key point to focus on, and a simple reminder during the rest period was enough to improve her execution in the subsequent set. On many occasions, my tendency to provide too much instruction can take over, and despite making use of more efficient type of instructions such as analogies and external cues, this overflow of information I'm giving can still negatively impact the effectiveness of those instructions and ultimately my athlete's performance. My goal regarding my own coaching behavior is to be more intentional with my cues and instructions, providing the athlete with the necessary key feedback points during training and limiting the amount of instruction that I give in order to allow the athlete to dedicate his or her attentional focus to performing the movement task in the most efficient manner. Whatever the type of cue and instruction I will feel is best to use in any particular scenario is going to depend on factors such as exercise selection and complexity, experience level of the athlete, and goal of the session. But ultimately, being more aware of the feedback that I have to give is going to help me improve my coaching skills.